Reprobates and Saviors, Season 1, Episode 2. Luke continued reading in his study, frequently staring at the armoire as he tried to digest Hortense Mancini's memoir. The ring of the doorbell caused him to jump. As he walked through the foyer to answer the door, he was surprised to see it was already dark outside. Upon opening the door, he was greeted by a pizza delivery woman handing him 2 large pizzas. Luke hesitated to take them, but almost immediately Sophia called out from the top of the stairs. "I ordered pizza for our dinner!" As she descended the stairs, carrying her laptop, she continued talking. "I'm too wrapped up in this memoir to stop to cook anything. You feed the dogs. I'll get the plates and napkins," Sophia directed. "I'm surprised they didn't complain earlier about getting their dinner late."
They usually won't give us an extra 5 minutes, especially in the morning. I don't know how they let us get away with being 40 minutes late.
Marveled Luke. "All right, guys, time to go outside. You had your dinner. Now it's our turn. Out you go," Sophia told the pups as she opened the door to the yard.
I love this loaded pizza, honey. Thanks for ordering it. These guys make great wood-fired pizza. I got lost in this whole story.
Noted Luke, with his mouth still half full of his first big bite. "I got mesmerized too, but my stomach started protesting," replied Sophia. "This woman, Marie, seems to have been very high maintenance. There's a lot of self-deprecations, but she still sounds arrogant to me."
Yep. Yep. I think I'm seeing that too.
Replied Luke.
Hortense is clearly trying to clean up her image. That seems to be the purpose of these memoirs. There are so many names and titles. I can't keep track of them, even with all the footnotes that the professor included. Why did you order 2 pizzas?
"Because I have a suspicion you won't want to cook tomorrow night. I'm sure we'll stay up late reading. Since we both have work tomorrow, I already know I'll be too tired to cook anything," noted Sophia. "Bring your laptop upstairs, and we can do a bit more reading before we need to get to sleep." They continued discussing the Mancini sisters as they finished their dinner. The dogs were let back in from the yard. Luke and Sophia were soon in bed, propped up on their pillows and fixated on their laptops. Willie and Nilly were each in their own bed.
This woman had the king acting as her marriage counselor.
Exclaimed Luke. "Really?" replied Sophia. "Marie was the king's first love interest. I wonder if there's some kind of competition for the king's attention."
From what I read early today, I think Hortense thought of Louis XIV as an older brother.
Surmised Luke.
He was nearly 8 years older than Hortense, but he was less than a year older than Marie. When I was a senior in high school, there was a freshman girl who had a tremendous crush on me. I saw her as a little girl and a pest. I don't think Hortense entertained the idea of an intimate relationship with the king, and the king probably wasn't thinking that way about her, especially since he had a thing for Marie. Plus, there were accounts that Louis did conquer Olympe Mancini, or more correctly, she conquered him. But he didn't really connect with her. She was like a month or 2 older than Louis.
"I was a freshman when you were a senior. Would you have treated me that same way?" asked Sophia.
Based on your yearbook photo, I was gonna guess yes.
Luke answered with a smirk.
You've always looked so much younger than your years.
"Good save, Slick." However, Hortense was married off to a man 14 years her elder. "Doesn't that shoot a hole in your theory?" asked Sophia.
Maybe, probably. However, that guy didn't grow up with her since she was 6 or 7. Besides, Marie was living in the palace too, and she was an adult by then. Surely she would have blossomed more than Hortense at that point.
Luke surmised. "All right, laptop's down," announced Sophia. "We have work tomorrow and it's very late.
Mm, at least we have pizza for dinner tomorrow.
smiled Luke. It's past midnight. You're talking about dinner tonight, sighed Sophia. Sophia closed her laptop and set it off on the chair near the side of her bed. After she turned off the lamp on her nightstand, she reached across the bed and tried to slowly close the top of Luke's laptop down. Luke gently pushed her hand away and said,
Okay, I'll shut down, but I want to bookmark this and a few other sites.
"Can you do it while you let the dogs out? They didn't get their last visit to the yard yet," pleaded Sophia.
Since you're too beautiful and charming to resist, I'll do it.
Agreed Luke. "I'm sure your desire to have a midnight snack is your primary motivation. Give me a kiss goodnight in case I'm sleeping when you come back up," responded Sophia. Luke carried his laptop downstairs and put the dogs out. He ate a banana and bookmarked a few pages before he let Willie and Nilly back in. After he turned on the alarm, he realized he was carrying his laptop.
I think I'll leave this down here.
He told the dogs, knowing they didn't know what he was talking about.
I don't want the temptation of reading any more tonight.
The three of them were soon in their beds and joined Sophia in a sound sleep that didn't last nearly long enough before it was time to wake up,
I swear these dogs can tell time.
complained Luke as he reluctantly rolled over.
I wonder if this alarm gives off some signal we can't hear, but they can. Why do they demand to get up at 5:58 instead of waiting for the alarm to go off at 6 o'clock?
He asked Sophia, not really expecting an answer. Luke gave each dog a quick pat on the head and tried to fall back to sleep for the 2 minutes before the alarm clock went off. They do the same thing when the alarm isn't set, and even when there's a power outage, mumbled Sophia.
Since you're too beautiful and charming to resist, I'll do it.
Agreed Luke. "I'm sure your desire to have a midnight snack is your primary motivation. Give me a kiss goodnight in case I'm sleeping when you come back up," responded Sophia. Luke carried his laptop downstairs and put the dogs out. He ate a banana and bookmarked a few pages before he let Willie and Nilly back in. After he turned on the alarm, he realized he was carrying his laptop.
I think I'll leave this down here.
He told the dogs, knowing they didn't know what he was talking about.
I don't want the temptation of reading any more tonight.
The three of them were soon in their beds and joined Sophia in a sound sleep that didn't last nearly long enough before it was time to wake up,
I swear these dogs can tell time.
complained Luke as he reluctantly rolled over.
I wonder if this alarm gives off some signal we can't hear, but they can. Why do they demand to get up at 5:58 instead of waiting for the alarm to go off at 6 o'clock?
He asked Sophia, not really expecting an answer. Luke gave each dog a quick pat on the head and tried to fall back to sleep for the 2 minutes before the alarm clock went off. They do the same thing when the alarm isn't set, and even when there's a power outage, mumbled Sophia. Luke turned over toward Sophia.
Hey, can you take care of the dogs?
"We'll both take care of the dogs. We stayed up too late, but we have got to get going," moaned Sophia as she sat up and put her slippers on. "Get up, Sleeping Beauty!" Luke turned off the alarm clock, grabbed the sweatpants from the chair, and pulled them on while he petted and pushed his dogs aside so he could get his feet into his slippers. The dogs were acting as if God were coming into their presence. They bolted down the stairs and raced for the back door. Luke and Sophia sleepily plodded down behind them. With the security alarm off, Luke let the dogs out the sunroom door so they could do their morning business. Sophia put the first pod in the coffee machine to get the preparation of their morning jolt started. Before Luke could finish getting the breakfast ration of dog food into the two bowls along the kitchen island, the sunroom door had four paws scratching at it. Luke let the dogs back in. After Willie inhaled his breakfast and Nearly slowly consumed hers, he sent them out to the backyard again to take care of their more serious business. Sophia brought warm croissants and 2 cups of coffee with cinnamon and whipped cream to the kitchen table. They both sat down to enjoy their coffee and croissants while trying to shake their morning sleepiness. I didn't sleep well at all. I would like to call in sick today and go back to bed, confessed Sophia.
Yeah, right.
Responded Luke.
You slept fine, just not long enough. You couldn't go back to sleep anyway. You would finish reading those memoirs.
That's true, confessed Sophia. I have to put all this out of my mind or I'll be worthless all day,
I didn't have a meeting with the most important client today. I'd think about staying home too.
admitted Luke.
Let's just put all this on pause until we get home tonight. By then, we should have the first bit of translation of the manuscript.
Sure, we'll park it, put a pin in it, hold that thought, not think about it all day. I'm sure that will be simple, said Sophia sarcastically.
Consider park it and put a pin in it to be some of the most annoying terms I have ever heard.
Pronounced Luke as he used air quotes. Yep, that's why I said it, laughed Sophia.
Oh, is that what we're doing?
Remarked Luke.
I'll put the Cars for Kids jingle on loop for your playlist. Better yet, I'll get some of those Medicare Part C commercials, especially the one with the Martha character.
I surrender, conceded Sophia. I don't know if that would make me suicidal or homicidal. Soon the dogs were back in the house and the sleep-deprived couple were showering and getting dressed for work. They managed to get seats next to each other on the metro rail and spent the short trip reading about the Mancini sisters on their cell phones. Both of these women were almost queens. The King of France wanted to marry Marie, and the King of England wanted to marry Hortense, noted Sophia. Still, Marie became a princess and Hortense became a duchess. I can see why Hortense left her husband. He was full-blown insane. Marie fled because she didn't want to go through another pregnancy. I think she was influenced by Hortense and the fact her eldest sister died from complications of the birth of her third child. Luke responded,
I don't doubt Hortense's husband was a complete wacko. But from what I'm reading, she was quite promiscuous while they were together and after she took off. Apparently, she liked men and women.
I'm not sure Marie was a saint either, shared Sophia. She tries very hard to appear that way, but by her own accounts of her tremendous desire to pass every carnival season in Venice, it makes me wonder. She strikes me as pretentious and vain, despite her apparent self-deprecation. She was very superstitious. Their father was an alchemist, astrologer, and necromancer. In other words, he was a fortune teller who claimed to be in contact with the dead. Her mother kept telling her she was cursed. The red line was running smoothly. The couple arrived at Farragut North in less than 15 minutes. Upon emerging from the subway, they exchanged a quick kiss. Luke headed north and Sophia headed south. They were distracted throughout the day, thinking about the crazy or fascinating women of the memoirs. After work, they met at Pete's Coffee and continued sharing their new knowledge and thoughts about the Mancini sisters.
How could anybody screw this up so royally as these two girls?
Marveled Luke. Did you say royally to be clever? Asked Sophia.
No, it's just a word that came to mind.
Responded Luke in his defense.
But it sure is appropriate.
I think their lives got screwed up before they had any decision-making authority, posited Sophia. Neither of them wanted to marry the men they wed. In an ideal world, Marie would have married Louis XIV, and Hortense would have married Charles II.
Well, that would have made a great alliance between France and England, or a tremendous war.
Assessed Luke.
These women seem to go hot and cold in a flash. According to their own memoirs, they were the best of friends, and then they were the worst of friends.
If you're trying to make a play on words and sound like the Tale of Two Cities, I swear I'm going to choke you, responded Sophia.
No, it wasn't. At least not consciously. But it is funny how Paris and London factor into this.
Opined Luke. I know Marie was supposedly a princess, but her husband apparently used constable as a title. That sounds like a police officer in England or somewhere. I would think he would be called a prince rather than a constable, shared Sophia. Luke quickly snatched up a napkin and placed it over his mouth and nose as he struggled not to laugh with his mouth full of coffee. He finally managed to swallow and avoid spraying anything. Are you choking or laughing? Asked Sophia.
I was trying not to laugh. I almost choked.
Luke admitted. What was so funny? Sophia demanded to know.
I had the same thought about the constable thing. I could hardly wait for my first meeting to be over this morning. As soon as I got everyone out of my office, I looked it up to figure who this guy really was and the significance of his position or titles. I got some notes here.
Luke announced proudly. Of course you do, teased Sophia.
If it's too nerdy for you, I can keep the information to myself.
Smiled Luke. You're too handsome to be a nerd, teased Sophia with a wink. Now tell me what you know before I change my opinion.
I'll tell you everything, but you have to pay for our coffee tomorrow afternoon,
Demanded Luke. Well, since we have a joint account, I'll gladly pay for our coffee for the rest of the week. Laughed Sophia.
Okay, Marie Mancini married Lorenzo Onofrio Colonna. He was the 8th Duke and Prince of Paliano. Not surprisingly, those titles were hereditary, but more importantly, he inherited the title and position as Constable of the Kingdom of Naples. The Kingdom of Naples covered nearly the bottom half of the peninsula.
Shared Luke.
In his case, constable didn't mean a low-level policeman. The constable was the highest level official, and his only superior was the king.
I didn't know Naples was a kingdom at that time. I assumed the city-states were a thing of the past by then, confessed Sophia.
Italy wasn't a unified country yet.
Luke scrolled through his notes on his phone.
It was the Kingdom of Naples and Duchy of Milan that were ruled by Spain at the time. There was the Kingdom of Genoa, the Republic of Venice, the Papal States, the Grand Duchy of Tuscany, and the duchies of Modena, Parma, and Savoy. I think there were some other smaller entities as well.
Luke added. So, the King of Spain was the King of Naples?
At the time, he was. When Marie married the constable, the King of Spain was Philip IV. When she fled her husband and wrote her memoir, it was his son, Charles II, not be confused with Charles II of England, who reigned for much of the same period. Since the King of Spain didn't hang out in the Kingdom of Naples, the constable ran the show,
Said Luke. Wow. So the constable was kind of a big deal, marveled Sophia.
Kind of a big deal. I'm pretty sure even Ron Burgundy would consider the constable to have been a big deal.
Claimed Luke. Ron Burgundy? That name sounds familiar, replied Sophia. Luke laughed.
Yeah, that was the Will Ferrell character in Anchorman. You want to find that movie on the Hallmark Channel.
Well, I walked right into that one. Conceded Sophia, shaking her head.
You should see the portraits of these two kings.
Remarked Luke, while he pulled up portraits of them on his cell phone.
Check this out. They were clearly inbred. Philip IV looked like Herman Munster. His son, Charles II, looked like Lurch.
Oh, my lord! Exclaimed Sophia. Herman Munster and Lurch were cute compared to them. They wouldn't need any makeup to be the main attractions in a fright house. Since these guys were kings, the artists must have made them look better than they were in real life.
The mother of Louis XIV of France was the older sister of Philip IV. Fortunately, Louis XIV and his mother didn't look anything like him.
Said Luke. If they were that ugly because of inbreeding, I'm surprised they were able to have children. Sophia replied.
Actually, Charles II couldn't have any children. He was the last Habsburg king of Spain.
Answered Luke.
One of the grandsons of Louis XIV was the next king of Spain as Philip V.
Does that mean Philip V was the king of both France and Spain? Asked Sophia.
No, the rest of Europe wouldn't have accepted that. There were agreements to preclude that from happening. When Charles II died, Louis XIV's son, Louis, and his son, also named Louis, were expected to be the next kings of France. So, Louis XIV's son gave the Spanish throne to his second son, Philippe. However, Louis XIV outlived his son for about 4 years, and his grandson Louis died a year after his father. Louis XIV was succeeded by his great-grandson.
Luke lectured. Let me guess. His name was Louis too? Injected Sophia.
You guess right. Louis XV was the great-grandson of Louis XIV. If the French Revolution never happened, France would probably have a King Louis XXX by now.
Spain still has a king. Is he a descendant of Louis XIV? Queried Sophia.
Yes, but there was a break in the Bourbon line. Things got too complicated for me to digest it all.
Luke admitted. Did you spend your whole day at work researching the Spanish monarchy? Asked Sophia.
No, but I did spend a couple of hours doing it this afternoon.
Luke confessed.
Don't worry. The meeting with the client was cancelled. I could have taken care of some other paperwork, but I didn't blow off anything important. Let's just say I did research rather than playing racquetball.
Aren't you ashamed for letting your personal research affect your workday? Sophia asked.
Yeah, a little, but I still work more than any of the other partners. It's not like I get paid by the hour, despite charging client by the hour.
Said Luke in his defense. Okay, let's get to the subway and go home before all the vagrants and mentally ill people start urinating, or worse, in the entrance to the metro. The nastiness and crime get closer with every month that goes by. Lamented Sophia. I wish the city would get these people off the street and into some addiction rehabilitation and job training programs rather than cater to their addictions.
That's not going to happen anytime soon.
Responded Luke as they walked.
Most of the ills of society are a result of deliberate policy decisions. Doesn't it make you wonder why politicians cling so tightly to policies and programs that have never worked or will never work, especially in a society and culture such as ours? How does a so-called public servant get rich on a government salary? How many politicians market themselves as saviors and turn out to be reprobates?
DC politicians are a great example. They can't figure out how to actually fix anything. The best they can do is cute little stunts, like putting taxation without representation on DC license plates. They would do better to put demand a good education. If they want to get full representation in Congress, they need a constitutional amendment. The only other legal option is retrocession.
Concluded Luke. Dare I ask what retrocession is? Replied Sophia, knowing Luke was seeking such a response.
In 1790, Maryland and Virginia promised to transfer the land to the federal government for its capital. The Constitution allowed it to be up to 10 square miles. Remember in grade school, you were told about the District of Columbia being a 10-mile by 10-mile diamond? But now the part of the diamond that was in Virginia is no longer part of D.C.?
Asked Luke. Now that you mention it, yes, I thought perhaps Virginia took it back when it seceded from the Union in the Civil War. Isn't that what happened to it? Said Sophia with sincere curiosity.
No, the federal government wasn't using it because Virginia transferred the land it promised to the federal government 10 years after Maryland transferred its part. President Adams and the Congress had already moved into the blossoming capital city, so no public buildings had been built on the Virginia portion. Congress banned the construction of government buildings on the Virginia side of the Potomac once the land had been deeded to the federal government. I'm not sure why. I think it was because of the separation of the Potomac River, presented particularly if it iced up in the winter.
Hypothesized Luke. Didn't they have bridges across the Potomac? Questioned Sophia.
I read about bridges years ago when I was looking things up about the Civil War. If my memory serves me, I believe a few years before the White House was built, there was a wooden bridge constructed where they call the chain bridge is now. It only lasted 7 years before it collapsed. I doubt the validity of that claim. It struck me as disinformation intended to defame the legacy of one of the greatest founding fathers of our country. One big red flag is the fact that Washington died in 1799. Washington laid the cornerstones of both the White House and the Capitol. The White House construction wasn't completed until nearly 2 years after he died. The Capitol's construction went on longer than construction at the Winchester House. Hardly anything else of significance in D.C. was built before Washington died. Anyway, the people of Alexandria were upset because the government wouldn't spend any money on the city. Alexandria was very much involved in the slave trade through its slave auctions. In early 1800s, the international slave trade was outlawed, but it didn't matter because Virginia was a major slave producer and exporter. At the risk of sounding crude, slaves were a cash crop for Virginia. The Democrats controlled Congress, so they wouldn't abolish slavery, even in D.C. However, the northern states did preclude spending money on Alexandria. So Virginia asked what it ceded to be returned, or retroceded. Congress said okay and gave the land back 15 years before the Civil War. I believe Congress could legally retrocede all the D.C. residential and business property that currently exists in D.C. to Maryland. That won't happen because Maryland not accept it back. The Republicans don't want to do it because they would never win another statewide election, even the occasional rhino governor. The Democrats don't want to do it because it wouldn't result in more than one additional seat in the House of Representatives, and it would not create 2 additional Senate seats for them. They want D.C. to be a state without amending the Constitution. They know an amendment is unlikely to be adopted, so they pretend that it isn't needed. In short, no politician actually cares that residents don't have a voting representative in Congress. Everything is just talk, designed to fool the citizens. In reality, the residents of D.C. have 535 people representing them in Congress. They didn't vote for any of them, but they didn't vote against any of them either.
Stated Luke. It just dawned on me that this manuscript was written at the same time our Revolutionary War ended.
That's true. The Constitution didn't exist yet. The states were still operating under the Articles of Confederation. When Wilhelm signed his manuscript, Annapolis was being used as a federal capital. Congress had moved there from Princeton, New Jersey in late 1784.
Wait a minute. I knew New York and Philadelphia were the capital before D.C., but I never heard anything about Princeton, Annapolis, and Trenton, Sophia exclaimed.
You didn't hear or read anything about Baltimore, York, Pennsylvania, or Lancaster, Pennsylvania in any classroom either. That's because our schools are horrible, from kindergarten to graduate school. In the summer of 1783, the Congress was in Philadelphia. It was threatened by rioting Continental Army soldiers who wanted to get their pay they were promised. The war was over at that time, although the official end didn't come until September with the signing of the Treaty of Paris. The Pennsylvania government didn't do anything to control the riot, so that's when Congress moved to Princeton. That event convinced them they needed a federal district under the control of the Congress for the capital. Of course, it still doesn't do much good. Congress doesn't bother to control the riots either.
I suppose you researched what was happening in the U.S. when Hortense and Marie wrote their memoirs, too, guessed Sophia.
You couldn't expect me to resist doing that. What a difference 100 years made. Obviously, there was no U.S. then. North America was in the early stages of colonization by the building of the settlements on the East Coast. Many of the 13 colonies, as we call them, didn't exist yet. New Amsterdam had just become New York. The French were exploring the Mississippi. Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth settlers managed to antagonize the natives enough to cause a war that had a death rate nearly twice as high as the Civil War. The primary chief leading the natives was called King Philip. That wasn't his real name, but it was enough to cause a war to be named after him.
Just as Luke was finishing his sentence, his cell phone chimed. He quickly pulled it from the pocket of his suit coat.
It's a message from Carl. He said he emailed the first tranche of the translation and wants to confirm it came through. Let me check my email. Yep, there it is. I don't have enough signal to open it here. I'll try when we get home.
Sophia was as excited as Luke to get home and dive into the material Carl sent. But she was even happier that the memoirs of the Mancini sisters and the mysterious manuscript had kept Luke from climbing up on his soapbox to rant more about the education system and a myriad of other societal issues he felt were awry. He tended to sound off as if he were trying to win a case in front of a jury. Luke made no secret of his passion about education. He couldn't understand why everyone didn't share his thirst for knowledge. He was especially disturbed with school boards and various levels of government that aggravated low achievement with policies to lower standards. He was also very frustrated by the mainstream media and the big social media platforms. Too often they ignored or buried important stories, lied worse than politicians, and grossly distorted facts and history to push or defend their own narratives. The train hadn't fully stopped at Tenleytown Station when Luke was up and pulling Sophia toward the door. "Slow down, Luke," she demanded. "I'm not speed walking through the station or up the sidewalks to the house."
You're right. I need to chill a bit. This manuscript and the memoirs have got me acting like a teenager playing his first Dungeons & Dragons video game.
Admitted Luke.
I haven't been able to focus on anything else lately.
As soon as they approached the door, Willie and Nilly were sounding off, eager to see their people and ready to race out to the backyard to relieve themselves. "I'll let the dogs out so you can pull up Carl's email. You've been bouncing around like a kindergartner who was too distracted to realize he had to pee," giggled Sophia. After she let Willie and Nilly out the sunroom door, she went upstairs to change into more comfortable shoes before letting the smallest family members back in to receive the treat they had waited for since the dog walker had departed 4 hours earlier. Luke had opened the email from Carl on his desktop computer in his study. He scrolled down through a couple dozen pages to feel confident he received the entirety of what Carl had sent. He quickly scrolled back to the beginning. At last, he could start reading the translation of his mystery manuscript. Sophia entered the study, followed by the patter of 8 little paws that ran to Luke for some attention. "So, what did you get?" she asked.
It's not what I got, it's what we got,
said Luke to ensure Sophia knew he wasn't planning to leave her out of the adventure that had found them by accident.
It looks like Carl sent the 2 letters and few dozen pages of the manuscript that he was able to translate in the 8 hours that we agreed. There's quite a bit here,
Acknowledged Luke. He petted Willie and Nilly and scratched behind their ears as they stood up against his legs, begging to be in his lap. "Did you let Carl know you received the material?" asked Sophia.
Oh, thanks for reminding me. I started to read the letters and forgot to respond to Carl.
Luke clicked his mouse, typed, and clicked some more.
That's done.
End of Chapter 3, Volume 1, Reprobates and Saviors.